Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is a place where we take on these just impossibly complex corporate giants, the regulatory mazes they navigate, and we try to turn it all into something clear, something that gives you a crucial insight you can actually use.
And today, we are definitely mapping some vast territory. We're looking at one of the single largest players in global healthcare, in managed insurance, and in pharmacy benefits.
We're talking about a company whose decisions really do affect millions of people, often at the most vulnerable and delicate moments of their lives.
We are dedicating this deep dive to the Cigna Group. And when we say group, that's a really important word here. This is so much more than just a health insurance company you might know.
Right.
This is an American multinational for-profit behemoth. It covers managed healthcare, life, and accident insurance. And this is the critical part, the incredibly powerful and frankly opaque world of pharmacy benefit management, or PBMs.
Okay, so that's our mission today. We are going to cut through all of that industry jargon, the mind-boggling financial scale, the complex corporate structures. We're going to trace its history, which goes back centuries, actually, through these huge, high-stakes mergers and acquisitions. But most importantly, we have to investigate the specific, really high-profile controversies, including a documented system built for rapid, sometimes automated claim denial.
And that system really defines Cigna's modern public image. We're trying to find the mechanism, the engine that drives its massive financial success, and then explore what the implications of that mechanism are for patient care.
You use the word behemoth, and that is not an exaggeration at all when you look at the number.
Not at all. I mean, just for context, so you can grasp the scale we're talking about here. In 2023, Cigna was number 15 on the Fortune 500 list.
Number 15.
Number 15. That's ranked by total revenue. They also came in at 68th on the 2023 Forbes Global 2000 list.
So you're putting them right up there with major oil companies, massive tech giants, huge retailers. That is a staggering amount of financial power, and it's all concentrated in the world of human health.
The numbers just don't lie. For 2024, their key metrics show revenue hitting $247.1 billion, with a net income of $3.434 billion. This is a machine that is absolutely built to maximize returns. And what's so critical for you, the listener, to grasp is the context of this scale. You have a single entity that is managing health insurance, administering life insurance, and controlling how prescription drugs are distributed and paid for.
That's the vertical integration you mentioned.
That is the source of its immense power. It's their strategic advantage, and as we're going to explore, it is also the root of some of its most significant ethical and regulatory challenges.
Because when one company controls your insurance coverage, and it also dictates which drugs you can get and how much they cost, it just creates this fundamental tension, doesn't it?
It does.
A decision to approve a treatment is both a medical decision and profit and loss calculation for the very same company.
Exactly. And to understand how that tension got to where it is today, we have to go way back. We have to look at the foundations, trace the lineage of Cigna back 200 years.
That's right. The company we know as Cigna today was officially formed in 1982. But it was a merger of two incredibly historic American corporations.
The first of those was the INA Corporation. That was the parent company of the Insurance Company of North America.
And if you want a sense of just how historic that is, INA was founded in 1792.
It's amazing.
I mean, George Washington was still president, and it wasn't just old, it was actually the first stock insurance company in America.
And the other half of that merger was the Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, or just CG. It was established quite a bit later, in 1865, by a special act of the governor of Connecticut.
So the name Cigna is it's a blend. It's a very straightforward combination of the letters from the merging companies, CG and INA.
Right. Their corporate legacy is branded right into the name.
And I think this is a really crucial starting point, because if we want to get a snapshot of the, let's call it the moral contract that these original companies represented, you have to look at the Great Chicago Fire of 1871.
An absolutely epical event. It destroyed thousands of buildings, left 100,000 people homeless.
It wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a financial cataclysm. The insurance industry was just decimated. I mean, hundreds of companies went bankrupt practically overnight. They just couldn't pay the claims.
But INA didn't fold.
No, they paid out $650,000 in claims, which was a staggering amount of money for the time. And here's the really incredible part. Out of 202 insurance companies operating in Chicago then, INA was one of only 51 that paid its claims in full.
Wow.
So that moment just cemented this reputation for responsibility, for integrity, for financial strength. And it's an anchor point that stands in such almost shocking contrast to the modern controversies we're about to get into.
That historical DNA of responsibility, it's been strained over and over again by corporate evolution. I mean, ever since that 1982 merger, the company has been constantly reshaping itself.
Right, to maximize efficiency.
Exactly. A big early shift happened in 1997. Cigna sold off the majority of its traditional life insurance business to Lincoln National Corporation.
So that was a very deliberate move away from being just a broad traditional insurer.
Yes, a pivot. They were moving toward specializing in managed care and group benefits.
And then, about a decade or so ago, we see this really sharp turn towards government-sponsored healthcare programs, which, have become an incredibly lucrative part of the market.
That's in October 2011. Cigna makes this huge strategic acquisition. They buy HealthSpring, Inc. for $3.8 billion.
And this wasn't a random purchase. It was a very specific move.
Oh, absolutely. It was purely strategic, designed to rapidly, massively scale up their presence in Medicare Advantage. The goal was to jumpstart their position in this growing government-backed sector.
And it worked.
It did, instantly. That one acquisition took their Medicare Advantage membership from a pretty modest 46,000 people to nearly 400,000.
So this shows that Cigna saw the huge potential in Medicare and these other government programs really early on. They were positioning for aggressive growth long before the era of these mega mergers really kicked into high gear.
And that sets the stage perfectly for where we need to go next. This is the period of the $67 billion bet and these massive corporate identity shifts.
This is really where the modern vertically integrated Cigna was forged, right? Through these huge, high-risk corporate battles. Some failed spectacularly.
And others just fundamentally remade the entire company. The first major chapter here is the attempted mega merger with Anthem, Inc. This whole corporate drama played out over 5 years, from 2015 all the way to 2020.
So in June 2015, Anthem announces they want to buy Cigna for $47 billion, a figure that I think was later revised even higher to $48 billion.
Yeah, and the ambition here was enormous. If this had gone through, the combined company would have been, at that time, the largest health insurer in the United States, just a massive consolidation of market share.
And it's exactly that size, that level of market concentration, that immediately got the attention of federal regulators.
Of course. In July 2016, the U.S. Department of Justice files a major antitrust lawsuit specifically to block the merger.
And their argument was pretty straightforward.
Very. The DOJ argued that if you combine two of the largest national insurers, you would massively reduce competition, especially in the market for big companies, for large employer groups, and that would lead to higher prices and fewer choices for everybody.
The legal fight was intense. It all came to a head in February 2017 with the district court ruling.
And that court sided with the Justice Department. They successfully blocked the merger on anti-competitive grounds. But this is where the story gets really dramatic. It goes from a regulatory dispute to basically an internal corporate war.
Right, because Cigna officially calls off the agreement, but the fight it changes arenas.
It pivots immediately into Delaware's Court of Chancery. And this was not a friendly breakup. It just devolved into this long, incredibly hostile legal saga where Anthem sued Cigna and Cigna countersued Anthem.
And they were suing each other for billions in damages and termination fees over the deal's failure.
Billions. It was extraordinary, especially when you consider the allegations that came out later in investor lawsuits, which we will get to.
So after all that, after years of fighting and millions in legal fees, what was the final outcome?
It was, well, almost anticlimactic. It was a corporate draw. In August of 2020, a decision came down that essentially denied both companies' claims for compensation from the other.
So they spent 5 years fighting just to end up right back where they started.
Pretty much. Having spent a fortune preventing the creation of the country's largest health insurer, the whole thing is just this powerful example of the kind of regulatory scrutiny and limits on consolidation in this space.
That failed merger was just a monumental waste of resources. But Cigna didn't even blink. They immediately pivoted and made an even bigger bet. And this one did succeed, and it cemented their new identity.
They pivoted directly into the drug supply chain. In 2018, Cigna acquires the pharmacy benefit manager, Express Scripts, in a deal valued at a massive $67 billion.
$67 billion, that number. It's just enormous. And when a company is willing to spend that much on a PBM, it tells you something. It tells you that controlling the drug supply chain must generate savings and revenue that just dwarf that acquisition cost.
Oh, absolutely.
For the listener who might have heard the term PBM but isn't sure exactly what it is? What did buying Express Scripts actually give Cigna control over?
It gave them end-to-end vertical control. They now manage every major step in the process of how you get your drugs. A PBM like Express Scripts does three critical money-saving things.
Okay.
First, they negotiate rebates from drug makers in exchange for putting their drugs on the insurer's list of covered medications, the formulary. Second, they decide what's on that formulary, often steering patients to cheaper drugs. And third, they manage the distribution, like mail-order pharmacies.
So by buying that whole function, Cigna could now control the cost of prescription drugs for its own members, but also generate huge revenue by selling that service to other clients.
Exactly. The company that covers your hospital stay is now the company that dictates which medications you take and what they're going to cost.
And this new identity became so central to Cigna's business that it forced them to do a whole corporate restructuring and rebranding not long after.
It was essential. In September 2020, Cigna took its health services portfolio, which was now the huge Express Scripts, specialty pharmacy Accredo, a company called EviCore, and they put them all under a new umbrella brand called Evernorth.
And this dual identity as both an insurer and this powerful services provider needed even more clarification, which led to another restructuring in 2023.
That segmentation was crucial. It gives them regulatory flexibility and a bigger market reach. The main holding company became the Cigna Group. The traditional insurance arm became Cigna Healthcare. And critically, the PBM and services unit became Evernorth Health Services.
And that segmentation allows Evernorth to act almost like an independent company, right?
Precisely. It can contract with other health plans, even direct competitors of Cigna Healthcare, so they can expand their PBM market share way beyond just Cigna's own patient base.
That is such a key insight. Evernorth isn't just serving Cigna. It's a separate revenue engine serving the whole industry. And that complexity probably makes it easier to sell off parts of the business too, which brings us to their very recent moves.
And the cyclical nature of these brand strategies. In January 2024, Cigna announces a huge divestment. They agree to sell off a big chunk of their government-sponsored programs.
Which ones?
Specifically their Medicare Advantage, supplemental benefits, Part D, and their care outlier businesses. They sold them to the Healthcare Service Corporation, HCSC, for $3.7 billion.
Wow, so that's a massive strategic shift away from the very government programs they previously spent billions to get into.
It seems to signal a renewed focus on their core commercial insurance business and, of course, the massive Evernorth PBM platform.
And this is where that fascinating corporate recycling comes in. HCSC, the company that bought these assets.
They announced in July 2025 that the newly acquired Medicare Advantage products, the very ones Cigna had grown through that 2011 HealthSpring acquisition, would be renamed HealthSpring.
They just revived the old brand name.
They literally revived the brand that Cigna had let go dormant.
It's a perfect little microcosm of how corporate assets and identities are treated in this industry, isn't it? A brand, even one you paid almost $4 billion for, can just be shelved and then resurrected by someone else a decade later.
It really shows how the financial mechanism often just supersedes any sense of brand loyalty or history. Okay, so we've established the history and the huge scale they achieved. Now let's talk about the current tangible scope of their operations. How wide is Cigna's net really cast?
Well, as of 2024, they're a massive employer. They list 73,500 employees around the world, and their core products cover everything: medical, dental, disability, life, and accident insurance.
And most of that is sold through employers, right?
Exactly. It's a business model built on group distribution through employers, large associations, unions. But their domestic business is really only half the story. Their global reach is managed by a separate, dedicated unit.
Cigna Global Health Benefits, or CGHB.
Right. And CGHB was founded way back in 1977, long before the Cigna merger. It operates in this very specific, very high-value niche.
Covering expatriates.
Yes, employees of multinational companies who are working outside their home country. This is complex, expensive, highly specialized insurance.
And that kind of specialization demands a global operation that's built to handle these incredibly complex, multi-jurisdictional claims.
Their headquarters for that unit is in Wilmington, Delaware, but they have major operational hubs all over the globe: Visalia, California, Greenock in Scotland, Shanghai, China, and Antwerp, Belgium.
So this structure lets them offer coverage that just transcends national borders, providing seamless care for people who are highly mobile. What does that actually look like in terms of their provider network?
It is huge. In the U.S. alone, they have a network of 550,000 physicians and hospitals. But to serve those expat clients, they also maintain a curated network of over 141,000 providers outside the U.S.
And crucially, that's all managed through their own in-house international claims platform. This isn't just them outsourcing foreign coverage. It shows a really significant long-term investment in a truly multinational operational capacity.
And this reliance on massive scale, on vertical integration with Evernorth, and this global reach with CGHB, that's what makes Cigna a financial powerhouse. But it is exactly this pursuit of optimization and scale that is inseparable from the controversies that have come to dominate the public perception of the company.
Which brings us right to the heart of the matter, the systemic issue, the mechanism of denial.
We really need to preface this by saying that Cigna has been operating under intense public and regulatory scrutiny for years. And a lot of that situation has been exacerbated by their own political and PR strategies.
For sure. Between 2005 and 2009, Cigna spent over $4.4 million on lobbying.
And that spending was obviously aimed at influencing the legislative and regulatory environment they operate in. And during that critical time, Cigna produced one of the most high-profile whistleblowers in the industry's history.
That was Wendell Potter. He was Cigna's head of public relations, and he resigned in 2008. But he didn't just quietly retire.
No, he became a powerful advocate for reform. He gave this damning testimony before the U.S. Senate in 2009, explicitly calling for comprehensive reform of the healthcare industry, citing his own experience watching the corporate machinery prioritize profits over patients.
And Potter also exposed some of their specific communication strategies. The UK newspaper, The Guardian, documented Cigna's alleged use of astroturfing.
Which is, let's be clear, the practice of creating fake blogs or fake grassroots efforts to push a certain narrative.
Exactly. To push narratives that were profitable for the company, particularly narratives that dismiss the need for universal healthcare systems. It shows a really proactive, aggressive effort to shape public opinion.
That political maneuvering really sets the stage, but the truly systemic controversy, the operational heart of this whole issue, that came to light with a 2023 ProPublica investigation.
An investigation into Cigna's internal claims review practices. This is a really crucial part of the story.
The investigation uncovered the existence of this highly automated, algorithm-driven system that they use to process claims, and it often resulted in rejection without any meaningful human review.
The system was known internally as PXDX. ProPublica's reporting, which was based on internal documents and interviews, it detailed how this PXDX system allowed company doctors to automatically reject entire batches of claims.
And the trigger was often something as simple as the claim lacking two specific codes the system was programmed to look for, a diagnosis code and a procedure code.
Right. But the most damning part of the revelation was that the system enabled these company doctors to sign off on these mass rejections, even if they had never opened the patient's individual medical file.
I mean, how is that even possible? Given the huge medical and financial consequences, how can a medical professional electronically sign off on a potentially life-altering denial without even looking at the patient's file?
Well, the system leverages efficiency and volume. According to the documents ProPublica reviewed, PXDX saved Cigna money in two main ways. First, it let them deny claims they would have previously paid. And second, it drastically cut the labor costs for denials, because the doctors never had to do an in-depth clinical review.
They just clicked a button.
They just used an electronic signature to approve the mass denial recommendations that were generated by the algorithm.
Okay, this is where we hit the single most defining data point of this entire deep dive. This is where corporate optimization meets human need and just fails spectacularly.
Yeah.
Over a 2-month period, Cigna doctors denied over 300,000 requests for payment using this PXDX-driven method. The data showed that these doctors spent an average of, and you have to hear this, 1.2 seconds on each case.
1.2 seconds. I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. This is a claim determination, a decision that could decide whether a patient gets a necessary medicine or a test. And it's reduced to a processing speed that's faster than a supermarket scanner.
It fundamentally changes the role of the physician in the system, doesn't it?
It transforms them from a clinician into a rubber stamp for an algorithmic denial machine.
And that incredible speed even earned its own corporate slang, which is just as telling. Internally, they call these rapid-fire decisions click and close.
Click and close. And what's more, this practice wasn't stopped even after the investigation came out. A 2024 follow-up report by ProPublica noted that a Cigna doctor who voiced concerns internally about being pressured to review cases this quickly was allegedly threatened with being fired.
So it suggests a corporate culture where the efficiency and speed of denial are highly valued metrics, more so than clinical due diligence.
The PXDX system shows us the scale and the efficiency of the denial mechanism, but we have to connect this symptomatic denial to the devastating human cost. And there's no better example of that than the tragic, high-profile case of Nataline Sarkisyan.
This case got intense media attention back in December 2007. It involved a California teenager who desperately needed a liver transplant. The facts was simple, and they were urgent.
A matching liver was available. Her doctors estimated she had a 65% chance of surviving for at least 6 months if the procedure went ahead immediately.
But Cigna initially refused to authorize and pay for the transplant.
And their official defense for this was widely criticized. They claimed there was insufficient data to prove the transplant would be safe and effective for her specific condition.
Which just strained credulity, right? I mean, liver transplants have been a standard accepted medical treatment for decades, since the 1960s.
Absolutely. Now, due to just intense public protest, media scrutiny, massive political pressure, Cigna eventually did reverse its decision. They approved the claim.
But the reversal came too late. Ms. Sarkisyan died while awaiting the procedure. Her death was just deeply, inextricably linked with the delay caused by Cigna's denial process.
And the tragedy was then compounded by what happened next in the legal system. The Sarkisyans sued, but in 2009, a California court ruled that their claims against Cigna's decision-making were preempted by a federal law.
The Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA.
Right, ERISA. And that led to the dismissal of all claims related to the coverage denial itself.
This point about ERISA preemption is so important for understanding the regulatory environment these companies operate in.
It's critical. ERISA is a federal law that regulates most employer-provided health plans, and it often acts as a legal shield for insurance companies and employers. It protects them from state-level lawsuits about coverage decisions, especially lawsuits seeking big damage awards for things like negligence or bad faith.
So, in effect, the federal law protects Cigna from the financial consequences of a decision, even a tragic one, as long as they followed the plan's administrative process. It just severely limits the legal recourse that patients have.
And when you connect the dots, when you look at the Sarkisyan case, that agonizing, high-profile individual denial, and you put it next to the PXDX system, the mass, 1.2-second automated denials, you see a clear and disturbing pattern.
It's the same tension.
Exactly. Both cases highlight the inherent, maybe insurmountable, tension between the pursuit of corporate profit, which demands fast, cheap denial processes, and the personalized life and death needs of a patient. In both cases, the corporate mechanism, whether through a legal shield or an algorithm, appears to triumph over patient advocacy.
And this tension is reflected so dramatically in the financial and legal battles that have plagued Cigna for the last 2 decades. Which brings us to their other major legal challenges. Allegations of earnings manipulation and outright government fraud paint a really concerning picture.
And we can trace this back to 2002. Cigna faced allegations that they violated the Securities Exchange Act. This was about alleged earnings manipulation, which destabilized the company and caused a big drop in their stock price.
So financial instability and aggressive accounting, these aren't new issues for them.
Not at all. Then you fast forward to 2020, and the Department of Justice gets involved, filing a major lawsuit alleging systematic fraud against government programs.
This was a really serious charge. The DOJ alleged that Cigna defrauded Medicare Advantage, Medicare, and Medicaid to the tune of $1.4 billion.
And the main mechanism of the alleged fraud was something called upcoding.
Let's unpack that, because it's a key part of how these Medicare Advantage plans work. How does upcoding generate fraudulent revenue?
Well, Medicare Advantage plans get paid based on the health status of their members, which is calculated using something called a risk adjustment factor, or RAF score. Basically, the sicker a patient is on paper, the higher their score, and the more money the government pays the insurer, in this case, Cigna.
So upcoding is just exaggerating how sick people are.
In essence, yes. It involves submitting diagnostic codes for health conditions that patients either didn't have or that weren't properly documented in their medical charts. This artificially inflates their RAF scores.
And Cigna allegedly maximized their payments from the government this way, leading to $1.4 billion in alleged overcharges. This shows that the drive to maximize revenue isn't just in denying commercial claims, but also in the reporting systems for government revenue.
It says a lot about the priority they place on system optimization, right? finding every possible avenue to maximize cash flow, legally or allegedly illegally, from these really complex government systems. But the legal drama wasn't just about fraud. It was also about extreme internal corporate conflict, going back to that failed Anthem merger.
Right, the 2020 investor lawsuit against Cigna CEO David Cordani and the board. It contains some truly explosive, almost unbelievable allegations about corporate sabotage.
This was not your standard shareholder lawsuit.
Yeah.
Investors alleged that the CEO and board used what they called black ops-style tactics to intentionally blow up the $48 billion merger with Anthem.
And the claim was that the CEO, Cordani, tried to poison the deal after he failed to secure the top leadership job in the new combined company.
Exactly. The lead plaintiff, a pension fund, claimed it was sabotaged out of personal ego.
That is just an extraordinary accusation, that a CEO would allegedly use internal resources, lawyers, PR specialists, to orchestrate a Trojan horse campaign against a massive merger that was supposed to create huge shareholder value.
It's rife with internal conflict, where personal ambition allegedly trumps shareholder value and corporate strategy. So while the main Anthem Cigna fight ended in a draw, these investor allegations really highlighted the severe instability at the top of the company during that period.
And if you overlay all this legal and financial turmoil onto public perception, the picture gets even darker. Cigna has been repeatedly recognized for just how negatively people feel about them.
They have. Cigna was named one of the most hated companies in the U.S. by the American Consumer Satisfaction Index, the ACSI, in both 2015 and again in 2018.
This isn't just casual dissatisfaction. This is systemic, measured public antipathy.
And the data really backs up that negative sentiment. It suggests that this perception is rooted in their actual policies. Data from 2011, compiled by the California Nurses Association, found that Cigna denied a massive 39.6% of all claims reviewed that year.
39.6%.
That denial rate is the foundation of the whole controversy, and it becomes truly alarming when you compare it to a major competitor operating in the same market under the same regulations. In that same time frame, a competitor like Aetna denied only about 5.9% of all claims.
So 39.6% versus 5.9%. That's not a small difference. That is a fundamental, categorical, operational difference, a sevenfold difference in denial rates. What does that imply about Cigna's business model compared to their peers?
It implies a philosophy that is just inherently more restrictive, more aggressive in its efforts to contain costs, or maybe more accurately, to contain payouts. That high denial rate suggests a very strong internal directive to maximize profit by minimizing medical expenses.
And it seems highly likely that this restrictive philosophy was the precursor to, and the justification for, developing that highly automated, click-and-close PXDX system we talked about.
I think so. When you are rejecting nearly 2 out of every 5 claims, efficiency in that rejection process becomes absolutely paramount to your business model. It raises that core question: is this a health insurance company, or is it a highly efficient denial processing company?
It's a huge corporate contradiction. A company generating billions as a leader in health services while denying nearly 40% of claims. But we do have to acknowledge the counterpoint to this. They've also secured industry accolades and major strategic partnerships. They're not universally failing.
No, and that's absolutely essential for a deep dive like this. For significant periods, Cigna has been recognized for aspects of its operational excellence. For example, in 2009, they received a Gold Award from Gartner and a 1-to-1 for exemplary customer relationship strategy.
And then just a year later, in 2010, they got the prestigious J.D. Power Award for customer service across all of their call centers, and they won that 4 consecutive times.
Which creates this really fascinating and instructive dichotomy for you, the listener. How can a company win prestigious customer service awards for 4 years running, which suggest excellent service interactions, while simultaneously denying almost 2 out of every 5 claims and being named one of the most hated companies in America?
It points to a fundamental misalignment between process efficiency and outcome satisfaction.
I think that's exactly it. The J.D. Power Awards likely reflect the efficiency and courtesy of routine interactions. Answering billing questions, changing your doctor, processing simple forms. It measures how easy they are to call.
It doesn't measure satisfaction with the ultimate critical coverage decisions.
Not at all. Especially not those life-altering claims. You can have a very friendly, responsive call center that is simply delivering bad news extremely politely.
The difference between being easy to deal with administratively and being easy to rely on clinically when the stakes are high. And beyond these awards, their history of strategic alliances shows a constant, forward-looking business strategy, even after the Anthem disaster.
Right, their alliances show their consistent focus on key markets, especially retirees. A key partnership was announced in April 2010 with Humana. The goal was to offer a streamlined Medicare Advantage solution specifically for employers focusing on their retired workers.
A partnership targeting a very lucrative, aging demographic.
Exactly. And speaking of Humana, that intense drive for consolidation never really went away. Despite the huge failure of the Anthem merger, Reuters reported in late 2023 that Cigna and Humana were in serious talks for another massive merger.
Potentially valued at $60 billion.
$60 billion. The talks were confirmed to be underway. Had that deal gone through, it would have been another colossal restructuring of the U.S. healthcare landscape. However, the Wall Street Journal reported in December 2023 that the merger talks were ultimately called off.
Any reason given for why those talks ended?
The report suggested a mix of things: disagreements over valuation, complex regulatory hurdles, and Cigna's board deciding to shift its focus. Instead of the merger, Cigna announced a huge stock buyback plan.
So it reinforces the idea that even at this size, consolidation is the main goal. But if a merger is too risky, they pivot immediately to maximizing shareholder returns through other means, like buybacks.
It's always about maximizing value, one way or another. And finally, their global strategy goes beyond just covering expats. They've also been active in pursuing joint ventures in emerging markets.
Right.
In 2011, they established a big international partnership with the TTK Group, an Indian business conglomerate. This venture, Cigna TTK, was specifically designed to grow the health insurance business within India, showing their effort to expand into diverse global markets.
Okay, let's try to bring all of this home. Let's summarize the key takeaways for you, the listener, from this deep dive into the Cigna Group.
I think the first key takeaway is just the sheer tension built into Cigna's very structure. On one hand, it's this financial behemoth, over $247 billion in revenue, with a deep, centuries-long history. But its modern identity is defined by this aggressive vertical integration, especially that $67 billion Express Scripts acquisition and the creation of Evernorth.
And that integration gives them this unparalleled control over the entire health and drug supply chain, which lets them maximize profit by containing costs at every single level.
And the second takeaway is that shocking operational contradiction we uncovered. You have the external recognition, like the 4 J.D. Power Awards, on one side, and on the other, you have the operational reality exposed by whistleblowers and journalists.
The 39.6% claim denial rate, 7 times higher than some competitors, and the explicit existence of the PXDX click-and-close system, where medical professionals spent just 1.2 seconds to deny hundreds of thousands of potentially life-altering claims.
And the legal landscape just cements that image of high-pressure finance and conflict. The $1.4 billion Medicare fraud lawsuit, the investor allegations of a CEO intentionally sabotaging a merger, all these threads come together to show a company where the constant battle between corporate optimization and patient outcomes appears repeatedly to favor optimizing the corporate process.
It's a profound and, frankly, a pretty unsettling lesson in how the mechanism of generating profit has become completely inseparable from the mechanism of managing human health.
And this raises a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider long after this is over. When these massive vertically integrated systems like Evernorth, which control pharmacy benefits globally, implement denial mechanisms like click and close, requiring doctors to spend 1.2 seconds reviewing a claim, does the pursuit of scale fundamentally change the nature of care? Has the managed healthcare industry, by achieving this level of automation and complexity, transformed from a human health service into a pure information and financial processing industry? And given the protections offered by laws like ERISA and the vast resources these companies have, what are the truly effective regulatory limits when dealing with entities that are this large, this complex, and this efficient at maximizing revenue through denial?
Absolutely. That is something worth some serious consideration. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Cigna Group. We will see you next time.